So the question was, what was our driving force behind recognizing that Cindy and I knew something big and wanted to share it with the world?
What we've learned and who we've learned from, a lot of them have passed, and their knowledge can't pass with them. It has to be able to be organized and presented in a manner that even when we're done practicing, it can continue to be implemented and provided for people in our society so that the most amazing machine on the planet can reach its maximum physical potential.
Does it take a certain degree of arrogance to decide you know enough to teach other people? Boy.
I would say confidence, not arrogance.
Hi, my name is Dr. Kristin Hieshetter. I am a chiropractor, also certified in cranial adjustments, nutrition, and I am a faculty member of the Integrative Health Institute. I have a podcast called Functional Health Radio that's available on Apple and Spotify. I've been in clinical practice for 20 years now, and my major emphasis is on functional health in terms of functional medicine supplementation, chiropractic, cranial adjustments, and low-level laser therapy. That tends to be my wheelhouse because my goal is upregulating normal function in the human body using a multimodal polytherapeutic approach. I think that's the best way to do it. And here I am. Hello.
Hello, my name is Dr. Cynthia Wiggins. I am a general dentist who practices in the North Shore of the state of Michigan. I am a board-certified craniofacial pain specialist. I'm also triple boarded in the treatment of sleep apnea through oral appliance therapy, and am the past president of the American Academy of Craniofacial Pain. And I'm excited to be here to visit with you today.
So the question came in, when did we become interested in the stuff that we do, the chirodontics platform and the craniofacial pain stuff? And for me, it was being introduced to it by Cindy. I had done cranial work for a very long time, but when she found out that I did sacro-occipital technique, she sort of took me under her wing and guided me into this particular realm of exceptional providers doing really incredible things. And I'm going to let Cindy take that torch because this is her wheelhouse. But I got sucked into it because Cindy has been a mentor and a guide to me for a long time, and I'm very blessed to have her in my life, and even more thankful that she introduced me into this realm of doctors because it's been amazing. Was it 2008? I think we got together and started dabbling in this. She had been doing it long before I had. So in 2008, Cindy and I sort of started co-managing some patients, and I started to learn from her. And then I was able to learn even more from Dr. Bob Walker. And now here we are at one of his courses, and Cindy has graciously guided me along the way, and it's been pretty incredible. But Cindy, how did you get into all this?
I fell into this rabbit hole when I received a flyer in the mail one day, and I was only a year out of dental school, so it was in 1997, that was sent out by Dr. Jim Carlson, and the presentation was on occlusion, simple concepts you can apply in your practice on Monday. So my assistant and I took off, went to the course, which was held in Traverse City. I met Dr. Jim, asked my typical million questions, and his statement was, you need to go to this annual conference, you need to meet Dr. Bob Walker. You ask the type of questions that tell me that your mind can get your head around the concept of comprehensive evaluation and treatment of patients who come into your clinic for help with their pain. And it has been a grand learning adventure ever since. I started with the masters.
So the question came in, when did we start thinking of medicine in terms of human health care? And for me, way back in the 1900s, you got to take these aptitude tests when you were in 9th grade and in 10th grade, and you weren't graded on it. It was just this test with 400 questions, and it sort of guided you toward your strengths and interests. And it didn't necessarily pigeonhole you. It just said, okay, Kristin, you would not be a good mechanic, you'd be much better doing human body stuff. Those were my interests. And it really became apparent to me when I was in college how much I was geared toward health and the care of the human frame. But I was always of the belief system that I didn't want it to come from a pharmaceutical. I wanted people to understand that. Why didn't I want health to come from a pharmaceutical? I feel that while pharmacology definitely has its place to help people get over the hump, and for some people it's a critical life-saving intervention, and for some people you need to be on it forever, I fully respect and deeply appreciate all of the pharmacology. I also feel that we live in a world that has been carefully propagandizing us to believe that we cannot achieve health in and of ourselves, and I don't believe that's true for everyone. I think most of us have everything we need to function at our fullest potential without pharmacology, and although I deeply appreciate and respect the medical paradigm, I think that most of us can really achieve a higher level of health just by paying attention to the very subtleties that exist in our world around us. Getting enough sunlight, getting the right nutrients. You know, we can cut our pesticide load by 95% by simply choosing organic foods. We need to choose the right supplementation through the guidance of a clinically educated nutritional provider versus just willy-nilly getting stuff at Walgreens or Walmart. And so my interest in medicine began at a very early age, but also it was an evolution of sorts because I was primed to go to medical school, and the chiropractic paradigm was just a better fit for me. I understand and deeply respect both worlds, but in my practice I have the freedom to build in the layers of healing modalities that my patients want and need, and I love that creative latitude, and also to be able to just learn new things that I enjoy and then implement those Monday morning without having to go through the red tape of the hospital paradigm and then a hospital board and those types of things. Parents, did my parents lead me in any directions? Honestly, no. My parents, though, they were both teachers. My mom taught preschool for 44 years. My dad was a middle school teacher who then went on to get his master's in education and went into administration. And my parents were very good at teaching us to be independent thinkers. My parents were very good at asking the right questions to find the answers within ourselves that they knew were there without telling me what to do, which is quite a gift. My brothers and I are all very different. One brother is an electrical lineman and very successful. One brother is a graphic designer at Ford Motor and is very successful. And then I'm in a health field. And my parents just knew how to bring out the best in every person around them by asking the right questions.
I have been interested in the concept of health since I was in middle school, I would say. And my path of action was originally to become a pathologist. Quincy MD was the guy when I was young that was not exactly the type of person you'd want to bring home for dinner to your mom, but he was very intelligent and figured out puzzles and problems based on the cases that he found. So my educational path started as a medical technologist, and I worked in the hospital setting for 3 years, including more than a year in the microbiology department. And I had the opportunity to assist on autopsies, which would have me going down the same path. And in visiting with the pathologist that I was working with the most, he stated, "Cindy, you'll get into med school and you'll get into the pathology program, but if you want to get married and stay married, don't do it." And about the same time, my wisdom teeth blew up on me. I had to get my third molars removed, and I thought that was pretty cool and said, what do I got to do what you do? And I didn't go into oral surgery as Dr. Mesnick had exposed me to. And when I got into dental school, there were many aspects of dentistry that I didn't even know existed. We all knew there was a dentist and there was an orthodontist, and there was pretty much the extent of our knowledge other than when we had to get our wisdom teeth out. And the knowledge that I obtained at the University of Michigan was the best in the world. Michigan and Harvard at the time were the two top rating programs, and I received an exceptional education through their program and was fortunate enough to be exposed early in my career to the concept of comprehensive whole body health. And that is how I look at my patients. I don't just see a hole and plug it. I look at the big picture. I would not say that I worked with any particular instructor in my learning process. I consider myself to be a hybrid, but my foundation is through Dr. Bob Walker and the chirodontics concept. And the biggest challenge I feel with the chirodontics concept for most providers is you have to think. It's not a cookbook. You have to take the time to obtain the data that lets you have a more comprehensive picture of what's happening with your patient. So chirodontics is the concept of there being a direct relationship between dontics, which is the teeth, which is what dentists play with, and chiropractors, which is the neck. And when you look at the complex, 50% of it is in the front and 50% is in the back. And if you really want to achieve your maximum medical improvement when you have challenges, if you're not addressing both components and as well from the neck down, which is also out of my scope, then you don't reach your maximum health potential. And having a team of providers to enable you to address the components that are in our scope of practice and in their scope of practice, it truly enables the person to be the most functional biological entity and God's most amazing machine that you can. When we went through our educational process, the part of our training that had the most amount of the concept of physiology, which is the function of the human body, was removable prosto, which is dentures. When we're making dentures for somebody, you're essentially starting from ground zero to figure out how to find a place for their lower jaw to function so that they can chew is the primary purpose of a denture, and speak and be aesthetically acceptable in society. But what using the prosthetic, kind of like an artificial leg is a prosthetic, you're replacing a body part. And when you're replacing a body part, the idea is to make it in such a manner that the body can continue to function to its maximum capacity. And in removable prosto, or in the denture world, that is what we had to take into consideration. When Dr. Jim Carlson was doing his presentation on occlusion, it was kind of a very wimpy description of everything that he was presenting, because he brought back to the surface the fact that what happens with how your jaws fit together affects your neck, it affects your shoulders, affects your backs, and what happens with your feet affects your pelvis, which affects your back, which affects your shoulders, which affects your bite. And how whether it's from top to bottom or bottom to top, you have to look at the entire picture in order to have things functioning as balanced as possible based on the parts that you have.
So the question was, what was our driving force behind recognizing that Cindy and I knew something big and wanted to share it with the world? And I think a lot of that comes down to what we had seen around us. You know, both of us practiced in very small towns for a long time, and we saw the complex cases that no one else could fix. Part of that process was because we don't take a mechanistic approach to healthcare. As Cindy was explaining, doing a prosthetic orally is going to affect everything down the kinetic chain. The paradigm that we now are in, we understand if you level the maxillary bone, you're correcting brain function. And where structure and function unite, you can change the entire cascade in the human body. We knew that we had a system where we could discern if a patient's major problem was coming from top down or from bottom up, and then what to do with that based on a very specific syntax. And what she and I both came to know, even though we come from not opposite professions, but just different, right? Viewing through a different lens, the one commonality was there's no specific syntax that's guiding the providers or the patients on how do we ascertain, is this a top-down or a bottom-up problem? How do we resolve it? Because as a chiropractor, you give an adjustment, and as Dr. Bob Walker will tell you 1,000 times when you go to his classes, the minute you swallow, you're back out of alignment. Why is that? Well, C1 and C2 are directly behind the jaw. And if you haven't corrected the cranial structure, you're going to throw yourself out every time. So the frustration for a lot of chiropractors and a lot of the patients is you have to keep coming back over and over and over. And you know, the other thing too, Cindy and I get tired of chasing pain. There are so many ways to help patients get over that hump. And I think that's what really has pushed us both to get interested in the clinical education component and to take these weekends away from our families and to create 12 to 20 hour courses with our colleagues. You know, iron sharpens iron, and we have been blessed enough to be around some of the smartest people. And I continue to push myself and hang out with people that are 10 times smarter than I am, because that's how we grow. And so doing the clinical education component has just gotten us into a space where the more we learn, the more we realize we don't know anything, but we still continue to try to bring that message to others who haven't yet learned what we've learned so far, right? We have to pull everybody up because it elevates us as professionals.
I think another thing that Kristin and I have both discussed extensively is in the learning process of going beyond the basics that we're all taught in our professional programs. And our professional programs, whether they're chiropractic school, med school, or dental school, or even veterinary school, they have a fixed amount of time to throw so much information in that they don't have the physical capacity to go to the level that is involved in comprehensive head-to-toe physiology and how the two are related to each other. And one of the things that we have found is that we've learned from some amazing people who are really hard to learn from because they're so far above us that it's like trying to drink out of a fire hose. So what we have tried to do is, one, we're both very good students at listening and extrapolating and coming up with the meat and potatoes of what's being presented, but also then being able to organize it in a manner that enables other people, the next generation, the next 2 generations, the next 3 generations, to learn the amazing information. And it's an unbelievable thing to take somebody who has had headaches every day since they were 10 years old, and they've now retired as a university professor, and from the very first day that you stuck an appliance in their mouth, they've been headache free. And that person was like, I spent my entire life with headaches, and it had to do with how my parts were fitting together and nobody could see it. And what we've learned and who we've learned from, a lot of them have passed, and their knowledge can't pass with them. It has to be able to be organized and presented in a manner that even when we're done practicing, it can continue to be implemented and provided for people in our society so that the most amazing machine on the planet can reach its maximum physical potential because it's respected as each part being related to each other, not as an individual piece.
Does it take a certain degree of arrogance to decide you know enough to teach other people? Ah, boy.
I would say confidence, not arrogance.
And to that point, the most intimidating time I ever taught was I had to teach a 2-hour block before one of my greatest mentors taught an 8-hour block. And when the sponsors asked me to teach 2 hours, I said, of course. And then when I got the breakdown of who was teaching after me, I went, oh my gosh, no. And when I did teach, I remember, you know, you have the outline, but you also adapt. And there were 250 people in the room, and somebody had a question about cranial bones and what sets the bar for needing cranial work in the first place. So I taught the 9 reflexes an infant goes through when they go through the birth canal. What is cranial work? That's a specific neurologically guided repositioning of structural parts of the skull that may have shifted due to trauma or aberrant neurological feedback from the ground up. The brain is a systems up system. And so when we look at cranial work, we look at the body for a system of diagnostic neurological indicators and then evolve into a plan of what we want to be doing to restore that structure and that function so that we have optimal cranial alignment for the health of the brain. And so teaching that was something that my mentor, even though he's one of the top functional neurologists in the world, he had no idea what that was. And so to get a compliment from him after I was done, because he had never heard that before, that was huge for me. And I don't think it's so much arrogance. It's, I've got a message that these guys who are 20 times smarter than I am have never heard. And with that great knowledge comes a responsibility. And so many people have never heard of chirodontics. And even though I'm not the best at it, I believe in communication and delivery. And if somebody has the confidence and the passion to want to deliver that to the other people who haven't heard it before, I'm happy to do it. And I love doing it because frankly, I think I was put on this earth to teach. My parents were teachers. Can cranial bones move? Oh boy.
So when Dr. Kristin makes the statement in regards to the ability to move cranial bones, it's not movement like you can see my hand moving. They're not gross movements of like when you think of the alien from Alien versus Predator, where the whole maxilla opens and you can see his lovely little teeth. It's not gross movements from that perspective. The easiest way that I can describe the movements that are associated with the cranial bones is that when women wear their hair in a ponytail or a man wears a hat, and if you have it on all day and it's relatively snug, when you take it off or you take out the ponytail, you literally go, ah, because the restriction of the ponytail or the hat keeps the sutures of the skull, which are not fused when the person is still alive and they don't have an atypical syndrome. The sutures are the funny little lines that you can see on a skull when somebody is showing an animation or a drawing. And each one of the sutures has a different mechanism of movements. Some of them move like a gull, some of them slide. And it depends on where they are in the skull as to what their mechanism is, but they all have to be able to do what they do, otherwise you essentially get a cranial wedgie. And the respiratory pattern and the ability to move in rhythm with your inhale and exhale, just like your chest moves in and out as you're inhaling and exhaling, or your abdomen moves in and out as you're inhaling and exhaling, so do the cranial bones, so does the pelvis. But it's not a gross motion where you can actually physically see it with your eyes. But when the natural rhythm is not able to move, the body has to try and compensate around it, and then it's the compensating parts that end up being symptomatic. And that's where having a team working together on an individual, it enables them to reach their maximum potential for health, because one profession can't fix it all by themselves.
And I want to touch a little bit again on the sutures and the cranial bones and how you can tell, or why it's important to understand why they move. We have to come through the birth canal in order to be alive, and when we're babies, those sutures are touching in some places and in some places they're not. They're called fontanelles. So an easy way to conceptually wrap your head around the fact that these bones have to move some,
no pun intended,
is to hold a baby. And what's more critical to understand, as Cindy mentioned, if you wear a ponytail or a hat all day and you take it off and you get this big heavy sigh of, oh, that feels so much better. Part of the reason for that is your brain has to make cerebrospinal fluid in the choroid plexus. You make between 500 and 1,000 milliliters every single day. And that fluid flows around the front of the brain in what's called the duromeningeal system. It's like a water balloon. It's the protective covering of the brain and spinal cord, and it's a closed system. So that fluid has to flow around the front of the brain, over the top of the skull, down the back of the spinal cord, and back up the front. It cycles, and it flutters about 12 times a minute. You can see that on a baby's soft spot. As they breathe, it flutters a little bit. So as Cindy was saying, that's why we have to be cognizant of the fact that these bones do need to have some pliability to the sutures, and they need to have a little bit of movement for good flow of that cerebrospinal fluid. And so then the question that was coming in was, what percentage of your colleagues know this or are doing this? I think the percentage is a little bit higher in my world, because there are a lot of pediatric chiropractors who work specifically just on newborn babies, or kids from 0 to 5 or kids from 5 to 12. The reflexes that they go through and move through change, so that the chiropractic examination process of different chunks of pediatric cohorts are completely different. And that allows us to look for certain primitive reflexes that they should have outgrown and maybe haven't. That tells us how we should address the central nervous system. I would say I definitely have a higher percentage in my profession that are doing it, but it's definitely under 30%. Yeah.
In my profession, dentists who structurally treat temporomandibular joint and craniofacial pains is only about 3% globally. And of those 3%, those that treat using the philosophies of the face and the neck being related to each other, whether it's through the teachings of Dr. Bob Walker's chirodontics or through Mariano Roccabado's, who's a physical therapist, 50-50 relationship, is maybe 0.5%. There really is not a massive amount of people, but they are out there. And right now we're at a point in time where I've been doing this for 30 years, and we are now at a point where we are having newer dentists, younger dentists, the next generation of dentists who are coming in and learning the concept of physiological relationship from the top to the bottom. And they're in the process of building their teams of structural providers to work with the dental providers to help. The exposure to the concept is not necessarily associated with the schools in and of themselves so much as being enlightened to the concept and doing a comprehensive structural evaluation and implementation is not something that is like going into the physician's office, getting a prescription for a pill or a shot in the butt and walking out the door. It takes time. The bodies have been out of whack for an extended period of time, so it's not like you're just going to flick a switch and everything's going to go back to normal. And in some cases, they were never normal to begin with. And having the frame of mind of not being a fixer, which is what a dentist is trained to do. You have a broken tooth, you fix it. You have a cavity, you fix it. We're fixers versus physicians and chiropractors are treaters. You have a condition and you treat it. And those are two very completely different frames of mind, where if you have the capacity as a dentist to go out of the assembly line process of give them anesthetic, remove the caries, plug the hole, send them out the door. If you can get past that and you can address the things that you know don't look right, but didn't get exposed to it in our educational process, and you're fortunate enough to meet somebody who has gone through the learning process and they can help guide you to the most efficient track of learning to implement it, that is huge. When I learned it, it was not a this month. It took several years of learning from multiple minds, extrapolating the information, compiling everything into a quiver, if you would, of instruments to comprehensively help people. And the foundation of chirodontics, meaning structure and dental, is what has enabled me to help patients be more human than they've ever been in their lives.
So the question was, is everything instantaneous, or is it a process that's step by step and things sort of fall into place for the patient?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, truly. I'll use my daughters as an example. We brought them to Cindy's office to just have them checked. They are 12 and 15, and I wanted them to be assessed by one of the top in the profession. You know, so of course I want to go see Cindy and get all of the best imaging that she has available in her office. And as a chiropractor who does the cranial work, I feel like my kids are doing very well, considering the first one was born in a posterior presentation, which meant she's going to have a lot of cranial patterns that I had to correct since birth. And I wanted to make sure that I hadn't missed something, because we all see our kids through those rose-colored glasses. And so my daughters went in and they had their cleanings, and then Cindy took imaging, and they both needed to be put in a special appliance called a myobrace, which I'll let Cindy discuss a little bit. But for my daughters, the change was instant, and we know it was instant because we do muscle testing. So we have my daughters stand with their elbows like this, and the practitioner presses inward, okay? And you could easily overpower both of my kids as they just stood with their teeth not touching and Cindy pressed against their arms. She puts the MyoBrace in. It's a dental appliance, which she'll discuss. She puts the MyoBrace in, and instantly the muscle strength for the latissimus and the deltoid and the cervical spine, it all went through the ceiling. And my children could immediately see that there was a physiological change. Cindy could not overpower my little tiny 12-year-old and my not so tiny 15-year-old with their dental appliance in, but without it in, she could kick their butts. And so the minute that oral structure was supported in a way that the neurological component could overpower what Cindy was trying to do to them, they got stronger. So for that type of testing, that's what Cindy means by it's immediate. If we're trying to change an eye socket or we're trying to correct migraines, that's a little bit longer of a process, but supporting them orally, the changes are instantaneous.
So a MyoBrace is, you could call it a mouthpiece that looks like what you would wear to play football. But it is different than a sports mouth guard in that it is designed to encourage the muscular, dental, neurological compatibility of the entire head area to find physiological neutral. It encourages very gentle, gradual growth and development. It's designed to help the muscles learn how to be in a relaxed position. The pressure of the tongue from the inside to the roof of the mouth and the pressure of the lips and the cheeks from the outside are what balances the tooth position on the inside. And it helps to keep things growing in the right direction.
Thankfully, I personally have not experienced pushback from boards or colleagues. And I feel very grateful for that. I believe part of that is that for many years, chiropractors tended to lock horns in a lot of philosophical areas, and it became a nightmare. And that older guard is still present. Part of the reason they locked horns was because less than 100 years ago, chiropractors were thrown in jail for practicing medicine without a license. And so I have a deep respect for the guard that fought a fight that I will never see so that I can be a mom, a clinical educator, provide good care in my office, and also travel and teach seminars on the weekends and have the freedom to take whatever continuing education I want to. 100 years ago, that was not the case. So I don't want to sit here and be so arrogant as to say that there was never a problem. Of course, there still may be. But the bottom line is I have a deep appreciation for those who fought that philosophical fight. However, we also, as a profession, have come to realize that the organ we actually impact the most is the brain. And Dr. Heidi Horvick out of Auckland, New Zealand, she is a neurophysiologist who has proven that when you deliver a spinal adjustment, you change brain activity. So I love what she has done for our profession because she's really opened that door for providers like me. They use quantitative EEG. They put electrodes on the brain, and what they do is it's a double-blind. So they take patients who have never been adjusted and don't know what an adjustment feels like. They get divided into two groups. Then she takes chiropractors to deliver adjustments to one group, and she takes people who are pretending to be chiropractors to be the placebo. So they'll just go in and they'll grab somebody's arm and they'll move it around, or they'll rub their back a little bit, or they'll slap their foot. And what Heidi has proven, because and then the people studying, she brings in neurophysiologists, recent graduates from Oxford, England, to read and analyze the QEEGs. In the groups that were getting true chiropractic adjustments, their brains were lighting up like Christmas trees. And the neurophysiologists are going, what's happening to these people? What's happening to these people? And the other guys are looking at their monitors going, my people are just droopy. So Heidi was able to prove through this double-blind, because the analyzers didn't know who was getting the adjustment. The subjects didn't know who was getting the adjustments. She was able to prove that the chiropractic adjustment changes brain function. Changing the representation of the body map in your parietal cortex when you deliver an adjustment, and that's why it takes time. I have not received a lot of pushback because of all the people that have paved the way for me. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because I'm able to now do what I do the way I do it because I can lean on the brilliant people who have come before me.
So in my location of practice and how I do my practice, I have received pushback neither from my colleagues or from the boards because I practice dentistry. I'm not adjusting someone's pelvis. I'm not giving them foot orthotics. I can see patterns, but I can't treat the pattern. That is why, from the dental perspective, needing a structural provider is a part of the picture. Dr. Kristin can see a dental component, but she can't treat the dental component. And basically, staying in your lane is what enables you to not get into the hot seat, and also not having this big pompous ego where you're standing on a platform telling your colleagues that they're doing things wrong. They're not doing things wrong. That is not how anybody treats. There are, most of the time, what we learn and how we're trained and our protocols work on the vast majority of people. And where what we're capable of doing comes into play is for that small percentage that don't get success in the traditional patterns and protocols. And when you're not going across the line of your licensure, you're not going to get into trouble. It makes a huge difference. If Dr. Kristin started doing orthodontics and orthopedics for facial growth and development and final tooth positioning, she'd be in a hot seat in a minute because that's outside of her scope of practice. If I'm doing a high velocity adjustment and I'm manipulating C1 and C2 because I can see that they're out of alignment, I will get into trouble because that's outside of my line of practice. I can palpate, I can feel, I can move their head around to see if it moves smoothly, but I can't treat it. I'm a screener.
What are we doing currently to reach out to colleagues and patients alike? Oh my goodness. One of the best things I've done, I was asked to do a podcast. And so I'm doing that.
What's that called?
It's called Functional Health Radio, and it's available on Apple and Spotify. So that's been a really fun side gig that started out as a passion project, but it has become a segue into, I've been asked to be a faculty member for the Integrative Health Institute, which is not up and running yet, but it will be soon. And that's an institute that's going to be teaching brain-based protocols to prevent chronic degeneration and also keep the structural component where it needs to be to maximize health.
Who is setting that up?
The Integrative Health Institute is being set up by a team of people, actually. The main fellows who are spearheading it are Dr. Brandon Brock. He's out of Texas. He's so well credentialed, I can't even name all the things he is. He's got a master's degree. He's got a master's in nursing. Just one of the most brilliant people. And it's very humbling to be included among him, Dr. Trevor Berry, Dr. Kurt Gare, and Dr. Robert Silverman. And so those are my colleagues who have guided me along the way, along with Jerome Waruka, Bob Walker. I've really been blessed to have them coach me. But in addition to reaching out that way, just getting involved with the chirodontics groups and connecting with them has afforded me the opportunity to begin to co-manage with Dr. Charles Fursley out of North Carolina. So we're basically reaching out kind of in an old-fashioned way, coming to seminars and networking with people and spreading the word. And so I'm kind of a newbie in that context. Cindy can probably speak more on it than I can. But at this point, those are the ways that I'm building momentum to eventually be able to share this stuff with the world. And with the Integrative Health Institute, there will be opportunities for people to pay a monthly fee to get all full access to webinars anytime that they want. And then for a different membership fee, you can actually get more content that will be applicable for continuing education units in the United States of America and possibly beyond in the future. Oh boy, to get in touch with me, I think the best thing to do would be to email my office at Integrative Health Solutions. So that's ihsflorencesc@gmail.com, and we can filter emails from there. At this point, that's going to be the easiest way to do it because I'm growing at a rate that I didn't anticipate. So there will be more efficient ways in the future. In fact, we just had dinner last night with some really intelligent people who are good at websites and social media and things like that. So I think I'm going to have that in the future. But for right now, the best way will be to email.
I've been teaching through my relationship with the American Academy of Craniofacial Pain. And that is the organization of dentists who are oriented towards structural treatment of temporomandibular joint problems, headaches, things that are within our scope of practice. And through the American Academy of Craniofacial Pain, we've had the opportunity to have Dr. Bob Walker do presentations on a couple of different perspectives of how he looks at things from a different perspective than the standard structural process. And I'm currently building an online data acquisition with precision training system to enable people to use the equipment that is out there, but to use it accurately. And the precision with how these bioanalytics are used has an effect on the information that you obtain. That information affects your diagnosis affects your treatment. And from my perspective, I'm not out to replace any of the other teachers that are out there teaching on any of the equipment, but I want to enable them to be able to teach what they teach to students who can actually collect the information accurately, to understand what it is that the information is describing, and then taking that information and enhancing the diagnosis, which then improves the treatment outcome. I am comfortable getting out there and doing more teaching, and I have a gift that it applies in my teaching of my dental profession as well as in my coaching in softball and volleyball of being a mechanic. I can look at someone and see what they're doing and enhance what they do and how they do it to have a better outcome on what their goal is. And that's where my gift is as a teacher, is taking the information that has been expressed by my mentors and putting it into a platform that enables them to implement what they're hearing and doing it with reproducibility. So regardless of whether they're doing the data acquisition themselves or their staff has been delegated, and whether they have 1 staff, 2 staff, or 3 staff, they're all doing it the same way. So it's reproducible during the diagnostic process, during the treatment process, and after the process is completed. So you're comparing apples to apples with consistency. My website is bioanalyticmastery.com, and it will have on it learning modules that have individual lessons within each one to enable you to use the type of equipment that is commonplace in dental practices that are doing structural temporomandibular joint therapy, and in practices that are utilizing Bob Walker's techniques on following syntax, collecting the information, and following the steps on how to go through it accurately. The best way to get in touch with me is actually to text me. I get to Kristen's laughing because she gets that. My cell number is 906-869-1434, and that is literally the most efficient way to get through to me. I get over 3,000 emails in a week, and I do not get through them all. And that is a black hole that my staff laugh.
So Cindy already broke the internet. Now she's going to break the Verizon network. It's her fault. As a final word from us, I think the most important take home is that she and I have a passion to teach as comprehensivists, right? Teach at a level that everybody can take something and find value to it and implement it, and also subsequent steps for follow-up. As Cindy said, she's setting up a place for people to go and learn the syntax and learn how to use their tools most efficiently so that when they go and hear somebody like Bob Walker, they can meet him where he's at and hit the ground running, because this stuff is absolutely life-changing for people. And again, that's why we're here. That's our reason. It's fixing the unfixable. It's saving somebody who didn't have any other answers, and they literally come in crying. You know, we have the joke in my office, if I don't cry with my patients 3 times a day, I'm having a slow week. So we are here because of that. We're here because we really love what we do, and we want to empower other providers to be able to carry that torch.
One of the things that is probably not Captain Obvious here is that Kristin and I used to practice in the same place, but now we're not near each other geographically, but we still stay in touch with each other. I live on Lake Superior in a town called Marquette. It's about 6.5 hours north of Chicago, 7.5 hours north of Detroit. Middle of nowhere, lots of mosquitoes.
And I am now in Florence, South Carolina, so that's way down there, but it's halfway between Myrtle Beach and Columbia, and it's just a little town. It's not even like a destination place, but it's been a good move for the family, so that's kind of where life takes you sometimes.
And one of the things that we are looking at is Kristin now has the ability to have a relationship with Dr. Charles Fursley. Technically, he's in a different state, but they're within the same region of each other, that their patients can receive co-therapy from a structural provider and a dental provider. And Charles has embarked on the journey of learning things from the perspective of exceptional dental, is what the dental component of chirodontics is now called. And that exceptional dental program has the ability to be viewed online by providers that don't have the opportunity to sit and learn from Bob live. And then when he does have the live course, having the exceptional dental training programs already reviewed and bouncing around in their mind and assimilating it into how they're looking at treating patients, then when they're at his live courses, then they have the ability to have everything clicking. And what I would like to be a part of in that process is that if they can collect information accurately, when they're discussing cases with Bob on the ones that are not straightforward, he's looking at information that is following the proven analytics that give you the most information on the comprehensive picture of that patient. And it is by no means a replacement of Bob. It is to 110% enhance what he is presenting so that the next generation can do it with the accuracy that I've been fortunate enough to do because I learned directly from him.